Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is literally redrawing the map of global business right under our noses: carbon border adjustment mechanisms, or, CBAM. Now, I know it's super easy to write this off as just another piece of dense environmental policy, but when you actually unpack the strategy here, you realize pretty quickly that this is not a regulatory penalty. It's actually, potentially, your supply chain's next secret weapon. We're going to decode the whole strategy behind this today, and by the end, you'll definitely see your operations in a totally different light. Okay, let's dive into this. Regulation isn't a burden, it's a weapon. I really want you to let that sink in for a second, because it totally flips the script on how, honestly, 99% of business leaders view these kinds of shifts. You know how it is, right? A new policy rolls out, and the immediate reaction is usually just groans, complaining about red tape, and accountants frantically calculating the hit to the bottom line. But if you're looking for a true market advantage, you know that massive shifts in the rules of the game, that's exactly where fortunes are made. The regulation itself is completely neutral. How you deploy it against your slower, maybe less prepared competitors, that's what makes it a weapon. So, just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's set our baseline. A carbon border adjustment mechanism basically acts like an emissions toll booth right at the border. Say you're importing heavy goods, stuff like steel, cement, aluminum, or fertilizers, and you're bringing them from a region with lax environmental rules into one with strict ones. Well, you pay the difference. So the absolute crucial point here is that this isn't just some minor tax adjustment. No, it fundamentally shifts the rules of global trade and supply chains. And with the phasing in timelines already ticking away, it's just the unavoidable new reality for the market. You can't hide from it, you can't lobby it away, you just have to outmaneuver the competition within it. Section 1. The basic compliance trap, a structural mistake. We've all heard of the cost of doing business fallacy. I mean, it sounds so professional, right? It's the exact kind of phrase that lets a boardroom just hand a massive problem over to the legal department with a collective sigh of relief, check a box, pay a fee, and move on. But here's what they completely miss. By accepting this as just a mere cost, they're permanently degrading their own margins. And worse, they are leaving the door wide open for smarter, much faster competitors to totally undercut them. Honestly, it's a trap perfectly disguised as standard operating procedure. It is actually fascinating how accurately you can predict the late adopter mindset here. It almost always starts with sheer panic over the new rules, usually because, well, they haven't planned for the phase-in period. Then their vision just entirely narrows. They only see the extra costs, which totally blinds them to any strategic opportunities. Third, they just passively accept those lost margins like it's inevitable, and finally, their entire posture just becomes reactive. They literally just sit around waiting for the regulators to send them the bill. Listen, if your organization is showing any of these behaviors, you're becoming sluggish, and in a market dictated by carbon pricing, sluggish means incredibly vulnerable. Section 2. Building unfair advantages, the power of moving first. Now, when we contrast those approaches, the reality of the early master mindset looks entirely different from the late adopter we were just talking about. It's all about deep preparedness and, frankly, aggressive market capture. So while the late adopter is scrambling around trying to figure out how to pay this new carbon toll, the early master, they've already optimized their supply chain to minimize the carbon content of their imports altogether. By doing this, the early master essentially lowers their overall cost basis way below what the late adopter could ever hope to achieve. They aren't just surviving the regulation, they're actively using it to capture market share right out from under their panicked rivals. Which brings us to a phenomenal insight derived straight from the GeneCapsule channel. The companies that master CBAM early could build an unfair competitive advantage. Really, this is the core concept you need to take away from this explainer today. It's an unfair advantage because the rules actually reward those who figure out the giant puzzle first. Think about it. Once you step up and secure those low-carbon suppliers, and you lock in the favorable contracts, there simply aren't enough of those clean suppliers left for your competitors. You effectively lock them out of the clean supply chain, which absolutely forces them to pay higher border adjustments. It's brilliant. Let's move to and see how this builds into an exact, punchy execution sequence. Step 1. Master early. You absolutely need to understand the carbon footprint of every single component you import, long before the regulators fully mandate it. Step 2. Adapt supply chains. This means actively stripping the carbon out of your sourcing. You either find cleaner alternatives or you roll up your sleeves and work with your existing vendors to green their processes. And step 3. Gain the unfair advantage. Because you put in all that hard work in steps 1 and 2, your products hit the border with a significantly lower tax burden than the other guy's products. Now you get to choose. You can either enjoy vastly wider profit margins, or you can lower your retail prices and just crush the competition. It really is that simple, and it's that powerful. Section 3. Achieving strategic dominance, long-term leadership. And this brilliantly illustrates the brutal reality of math in a carbon-adjusted world. We're talking about massive market share dominance for the early CBAM masters, while the reactive competitors just get squeezed out. Let's say your competitor has to pay a 15% border adjustment because they're stuck with a dirty supply chain, but you only pay 2% because yours is optimized and clean. There's just no way they can compete with you on price. Over time, that structural cost difference translates directly into you taking a huge slice of the pie right off their plate. The market share simply migrates naturally to the most carbon-efficient player. Which leads us perfectly into the ultimate strategic moat. See, by the time the reactive, late adopters finally wake up and realize they are stuck in the compliance trap, the early masters are going to have already built an impenetrable barrier. Because let's face the reality here. Restructuring a global supply chain, that takes years. You can't just flip a switch overnight. If it takes you 3 years to master the stuff, well, you are 3 years ahead, period. When your competitors finally do realize they need to change, they're going to have to suffer through 3 years of bleeding cash to border adjustments, all while you operate from an entrenched position of total dominance. So that leaves us with a slightly uncomfortable question, doesn't it? Will CBAM be your greatest cost or your greatest weapon? Honestly, the choice is entirely up to how you act today. When you look at your own supply chain right now, are you the predator, ready to capture market share? Or are you the prey, just waiting to be squeezed by smarter competitors and border taxes? Don't let regulation be a burden. Weaponize it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really encourage you to go take a hard look at your strategy today.